Chapter 8, we're going to be discussing organizational culture, structure, and design. So, one of the or several of the learning objectives that you should be able to achieve by the time you're done with this chapter is you should be able to describe how managers align their vision and strategies with the culture and structure of the organization, how to characterize your culture within the organization, and describe the process of culture change. Compare the various structures of nonprofit, for profit, and multi mutual benefit organizations, and identify the major elements of an organization and describe the 8 organizational structures. You should be able to identify the factors that affect the design of the structure of your organization and describe how to use career readiness competencies um, for understanding the business and your personal adaptability to assess your organization's internal context. Now, how do you stand out in a new job? There is a fitting in process, usually within the first 60 days, to fit into the culture of the organization. Um, you'll read about this in Manager's Toolbox, when there's a former business columnist, Jack Welch, and his wife, Susie Welch. They said once you are in the real world, and it doesn't make any difference if you are 22 or 62, starting your first job or your 5th, the way to look great and get ahead is to over deliver. And so, some of the things that you should, of course, do in the first 60 days are be aware of the power of first impressions. Don't be dismissive of it, because it leaves an indelible mark that is very difficult to rewire. See how people behave by arriving early and staying late, right? You get to see a lot. You can be able to network and build relationships with people and find out how the organization works, and of course, asking for advice. So, when you look at your past experiences and starting a new job, how does this advice align with your past experiences? Are there things that you wish you could have done differently? And so, if yes, or you can really think about the things that you could have done differently. If no, if you did something totally different and you're fine with the way that is, then that is the answer that you've selected. Now, something else to always understand is that I've shared this with all of you before, but the culture of the organization is always framed by the top of the organization. It's the shared assumptions that affect how we get work done. And so there's things that we often take for granted because we implicitly assume certain things that we believe the group as a whole holds as truth. And based on that, we determine how the organization as a whole will perceive things, think about things, and react to various things in our environment. This is also called the corporate culture. And so you could see that interchange in either environment. And with this, you have to understand that the culture is going to be passed on to you as a new employee, just as you'll pass it on to new employees. And it's through a way of socialization and through mentoring. And this can significantly impact the outcomes of the work that you do and the work of the team does at all levels. It literally is the glue that creates the stickability that binds you and others to this organization. That is what the culture is all about. Just like we have our individual unique personalities, the organization also has its own personality, and that personality is the culture. And so it helps you to understand why the company does what it does and how it intends to accomplish its short-term and long-term goals. The drivers of the culture starts with the values and beliefs of the founder, of the CEO, um, and the understanding that the CEO does not necessarily have to have been the founder. It is driven by the business environment, the industry environment. It can be driven by the national culture of the country that it is in, and the vision and strategy that is leading the charge for the organization, as well as the behavior of leaders within um, your company. So it can be adjusted, it can be totally overhauled, but that is going to be based on all of these different drivers in some capacity. So if there's no external influence or pressing reason to change the culture, it is rare that you'll see it. Sometimes it can be an internal, motivator of some type of crisis, um, or a awakening of sorts that can drive the founder and or CEO to say we need to bring about change. So, and then from there, it is then interwoven throughout the organization. This is just another way of looking at it, but here's the drivers of the culture, and then you can see the flow. And this is figure 8.1 in your textbook. It helps you to see how culture and structure influence each other. So you have the drivers of the culture that I just mentioned, and it then goes into to form the organizational culture or the corporate culture. And from there, we develop the structure and the internal processes in order to make it fully embedded within the organization. And then from there, we have our various group and social processes that are factored in. And all of that then becomes the attitudes and behaviors of the workplace, of the workers within that environment. And from there, we start to see the overall performance of how that takes, it shapes and takes form. And the end product is usually in the ways in which we behave, but also in the quality and the care of the products and services that we deliver. So you can see the unfolding of it over time. Now, within the organizational structure, it is defining who reports to which individuals, and it defines who is responsible for what work. And it is a formal system of the various tasks and relationships that we have that coordinates and motivates each person within that team to do their job, to work together in order to achieve the goals of the company. And so we're focused on who and what we do, right? And when we're looking at a particular strategy, a manager has to determine the right kind of culture and structure that can mutually influence each other. If you have this big gap between the two, if they are vastly different, you're going to always find that there's going to be some confusion and chaos. So you have to make sure that you have two that can work in tandem with each other. The three levels of culture happen to be level one is your observable artifact. It's literally the physical manifestations of culture. It is the most visible level. And this can be the manner of our dress. So it could be dress code. It can be awards that are issued and received. It could be the various myths and stories about the company. It can be various ceremonies and decorations and rituals. It can be the visible behavior that managers, employees exhibit. So these are the things that we can outwardly see and feel. Level two is the espoused values. These are explicitly stated norms and values. And these are what is preferred by the company, and is usually put forth by, your founder or the top senior managers within the organization. The third level is your basic assumption, is the core values of the company. They're not observable, they're not, tangible, but it is the essence of, it's the foundation of what leads the company. And they're usually taken for granted. um, but as a result, they're difficult to change. They just kind of are. So it's one of those, well, this is how we are. That's when you know that that's the core value. Whether that's a positive or negative, that's not the fact. It's really looking at where it's just taken for granted. Like it's just the thing that it's an is. So those are your three levels. And then we get to the four types of culture. The first that is on the slide happens to be your clan culture, and this is not to be confused with the KKK. This is more like a family type organization. It encourages collaboration amongst your team members. It encourages cohesion, right? So it's that stickability. Um, and the cohesion is encouraged through group consensus and the job satisfaction. It's also focused on how to go about increasing commitment through your involvement as a team member. And organizations that are built on this culture really devote a lot of their resources to hiring and developing their employees, and they view their customers as partners. An example of this would be, for instance, Chick-fil-A. So within this environment, you see an internal focus, you see flexibility over stability, and collaboration. Then from that, we have our ad hoc culture. Adhocracy is an attempt to create innovative products by being adaptable, creative, and quick to respond to change in the marketplace. You are encouraged to take risks and experiment with new ways of getting things done. An ad hoc culture is well suited for startup companies, industries that are undergoing constant change, as well as mature industries that are in need of some really exciting innovation to enhance their growth. So, an example of an ad hoc culture would be Google. The third culture is market culture, and they are focused primarily on the external environment, and they are very much driven by competition and getting results delivered. They're highly focused on their customers and productivity, and profits usually take precedence over developing and satisfying employees. So they're going to be very profit driven. Employees are expected to work hard, react fast, deliver quality work on time, and the ones that do are rewarded. The ones that aren't or don't usually are graciously at times escorted out. So, an example of this would be Uber as a market culture organization. The hierarchy culture is really focused on a formalized, structured work environment. They are zooming in on how they could achieve a level of effectiveness through a variety of control mechanisms. And if you remember remember we talked about the management function of control, right? So it's in all the different ways that we can create the reporting and accountability to measure our progress, to see whether or not we're on track or we are deviating, and in the ways in which we can realign. So they use a variety of control mechanisms to measure efficiency, timeliness, and relatability. And in doing so, how they can create and deliver products. So when you think of a hierarchy culture, it is, for example, Amazon. They are really focused on managing their shipping processes, and that is something that drives them considerably. When we look at our framework of competing values, as you can see at the top, we have flexibility and discretion. Then at the very bottom, you see stability and control. And then to the left is internal focus and integration. And to the right is external focus and differentiation. So on the scales of this, you can see the CVF provides a practical way for managers to understand and measure and change the cultures of their organization. And it's been validated by extensive research involving over 1,100 companies. And they classify cultures into four types: clan, ad hoc, market, and hierarchy, as we just finished going over. When you look at the horizontal dimension, right? Hopefully you know what horizontal. That's the one that's going straight across, right? Left to right, it's going straight across. Of that T, that's your horizontal dimension. There's an inward or an outward focus. And this dimension expresses the extent to which your company is going to focus their attention and efforts inward on internal dynamics and your employees, right? So that would be the internal focus and integration, or a focus outward, and they're looking at their external environment, and from there, that's their focus on their customers and their shareholders. That is the external focus and differentiation. Now, when you look at the vertical line, the line that's going straight up and down, this is a focus on whether there's flexibility or stability. And so, what does the organization prefer? Do they prefer flexibility and discretion, or stability and control? And so, when you combine these two dimensions, they create the four types of organizational culture based on the different values. Namely, that would be clan, ad hoc, market, and hierarchy, right? So these are how those are all factored in, and you can see the source from the article where this was accessed. Now, how do we go about learning the culture of an organization? And that's usually a question that comes up. If I want you guys to, well, first let me go over these, and then I'm going to have some questions pop up. So first we have symbols. There's objects or quality. There could be an act. There could be an event that's going to convey meaning to others. There's stories. So it could be based on true events, or it could be some myths, right? But they are oftentimes embellished upon, especially the more the story's repeated and the many years that go on. But the point is that they're emphasizing a particular value. So we're talking about a time of victory or overcoming some type of, failing or hardship or whatever that took place in the company, how the company pulled itself up, out of the deep, dark valley experience that it had. And then somehow it just, there's some heroics that take place in some level. That can also tie into heroes, where you're looking at individuals within the company that accomplished these great things that embodied the value of that company. So you may talk about some of the legendary, team members, and maybe even their pictures are framed on the walls or something. The fourth would be rites and rituals, and these could be different ceremonies or activities that celebrate various occasions and accomplishments within the company. So it could be, various, banquets or whatever the case may be that the organization goes through. And then lastly, not least, we have organizational socialization or corporate socialization. And this is where you learn the values and the required behaviors and the norms of the company where you work. So it is in the various ways. So these are the 5 ways that you can learn culture. Now, here's the question that I want to pop up with you is, can you name some companies that have especially noticeable symbols, stories, or heroes? Can you name some companies that have they're just totally noticeable symbols, stories, or heroes, right? some type of object, image, a quality, an event that has meaning to others, stories, about their hard knock come up of sorts, or how they overcame, or how they grew to be the giants they are, or any particular individuals. It could be the founder, it could be the CEO, it could be the fourth CEO, it could be certain members on the front line or whatever that are seen as heroes. They've accomplished greatness that embodies the values of the organization. Can you name some of those companies? Now, the next question I have is, what types of rituals and rites have you experienced at work or in school? So I'm just going to give you a couple. Work anniversary celebrations, pep rallies, for example. So, what types of rites and rituals have you experienced at work or in school? And then that is this. I want to make sure that I stress something, because some people may have a question as to the last bullet point, which is dealing with the corporate socialization, is how long could that possibly take? And that can take weeks, or it could take years for you to truly learn and embrace and understand the values and the norms and the behaviors that are expected of you with an organization. So some people can get it really quickly, and other people, it may take you some time. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarify that. So moving right along, let's go ahead and start with the big mama question. So, Mary Kay Cosmetics Company. I used to be a consultant with them. I used to be a Mary Kay person. Yay! The best salespeople can receive pink Cadillacs in a special awards ceremony. This, and you can also, if you don't want the pink Cadillac, you can take the cash equivalent. Which years ago, when I was in Mary Kay back in early 2000s, I think the cash equivalent was like $1,500 a month. So you can receive these special awards. Now, is this an example of a symbol, a value, a rite or ritual, or is it D, both a symbol and a rite? All right, you should have your answers submitted. Let's move right along. So, figure 8.3 in your textbook shows you the importance of culture and the various benefits that are associated with corporate cultures. Many people believe that culture has this powerful shaping effect on the long-term success of an organization by enhancing its competitive advantage. And so there were a team of researchers that tested this hypothesis with a meta-analysis. And a meta-analysis is a statistical procedure that combines the data from multiple studies. And they did this with more than 38,000 units of various organizations. And it was organizations and units that were either the entire company, or there were various departments that were in different organizations. And in doing so, they were able to research 616,000 individuals. And so we see here that the variables that they were looking at ranged from positive work attitudes and market share, innovation, all the way to financial growth, and whether or not there was significance of no significance or strong significance. And so that was the strength of relationship. You can also see the little key at the bottom that shows the various colors that represent whether the culture was clan, ad hoc, market, or hierarchy. So you can see which one. So here's what the results revealed: that an organization's culture matters, and employees truly do have more positive work attitudes when they work in an organization with a clan culture. And clan and market cultures are more likely to deliver higher customer satisfaction and market share. They also saw that operational outcomes, quality, and innovation are more strongly related to clan, ad hoc, and market cultures than to hierarchical ones. And an organization's financial performance is not strongly related to their culture. And then lastly, they determined that companies with market cultures tend to have more positive organizational outcomes. So I'm just going to show you the slide again. And we can see that in positive work attitudes, the one that had the strongest relationship was clan. We see that when it comes to your financial growth, that market and hierarchy were tied, but they're still weak, right? The ones that had no significant impact dealing with financial growth was clan and ad hoc, and that's the same for both the growth and performance. You see the same results in both categories for all four. Then we look over to innovation and product service quality and operational efficiency. And I think those those three, I should say, they all have identical they all have identical markers. So it's really interesting to see those dynamics. Now, considering that each of these results that I've outlined, all six, is this in line with what you would have expected to see based on what I've already shared with you about each of the cultural environments? And is there anything that was unexpected? Like, did you expect financial performance to have a stronger relation to the culture of an organization or not? So those are things that, to really consider. Now, when we talk about fitting into an organization, there are some things that, come into play and what you should anticipate in a job interview. And these are some things that in some of my previous classes, when we are on campus, a lot of times we actually go through the process of doing a very interesting interview process, both of group and, we role play in the interview process, and we switch things up based on different scenarios that I provide. Now, we see that the four most frequently asked interview questions that are used by hiring managers to date, and this was a survey that involved about 285,000 kinds of questions, but some of the questions were like, what's your favorite movie? And what's your favorite website? What makes you uncomfortable? What's the last book you read for fun? Now, these questions might not seem to have much to do with your performance in previous jobs, but what the interviewer is trying to find out is how well you fit in. And that's what's called the person-organization fit. It reflects which of your personality and values match the climate and culture in an organization. And a good fit of this kind is important because it's associated with more positive work attitudes and task performance, usually lower stress and fewer expressions of, I want to quit. So when you look at the textbook, it shows that more than 50% of the evaluators in one study considered a fit to be the most important criterion of the interview process. Now, can you just easily answer these 4 questions? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite website? What makes you uncomfortable? What's the last book you read for fun? For me, it's and I'll just say this because it'll pop up on yours, but I don't like have a favorite movie. I love movies. And so there's not one favorite that I have, because I love movies of different like genres. So there's nothing that just like sticks to the front of my mind. I am a movie junkie. So it could be sci-fi, it could be horror, thriller, romance. It could be autobiographical, a documentary. It's just the sky's the limit for me. So for that one, it they can see that history, anything, I'll take it. My favorite website. Wow. So my favorite website, I would say, would possibly be Now I could say my favorite app. My favorite app happens to be one of my favorite apps happens to be my Bible app. Now, as far as a website is concerned, I don't have a go-to like my blog. When I can look at some of the other apps, I could say in the past when I was actively engaged, I could say, Instagram, which is, more app based than it is website based. Twitter, is pretty much the same. So yeah, that's what that. What makes me uncomfortable? What makes me uncomfortable are creepy crawly things. And another thing that makes me uncomfortable would be sharing personal stuff about myself, things that, are personal in nature. And then the last book that I read for fun, I am constantly absorbing books. So for me, so I guess that would be things that were not work related, which I'd say a lot of my books are. There's Outlander and Girl Stop Apologizing, even though I didn't finish that one all the way. So I was reading that one. The Robber Bride, Casting the First Stone. Those are some of the last books that I read for fun. I was almost done with Educated. I'm almost done with that one. That's by Tara Westover. And Daring Greatly. Yeah. So there's some others, but those are like the last ones I read for fun. Now, you see how that it rolls out. Now that can say a lot about me. And it sees in whether or not that based on my personality, based on the things that I expressed, whether or not I would fit in certain environments and which ones, are just like red flags. So if we go backwards really quick, and we look at the values, the CVF, and you can see, which ones that, the focal point on, collaborating or creating, controlling, competing, definitely you could see where, in a lot of regards, based on my answers, that you could find me that I'd probably be more suited in an ad hoc or a clan environment than necessarily a hierarchy or a market, just based off those answers. Now, if but and that's the thing. So it depends on what I'm saying. If I had said that The Wolf of Wall Street is one of my favorite movies, and the last book that I read happened to be a um, some type of business related book, but it was just for fun, right? Or leadership book of sort. You could then say, okay, there's a possibility that she'd align more to a market or even a hierarchy, you know, environment. So based on that, it can speak volumes. So I would say, don't lie and say, oh, you were reading this business book, and then all of a sudden because you may get caught up, and that person then actually read the book and they start asking you questions about it. Then you're looking really, really silly. So just understand that if you have a way to peek in to see what the culture of that organization is, a lot of times you can tell from their website or from the videos they share or what they put on social media. Sometimes they like blatantly just share like this is how we're the type of environment. They may say collaborative, they may say competitive, they may talk a lot about profitability, they may talk a lot about goal achievement and customer focus. There's certain keywords that they may express or imply that you can gauge whether or not that aligns with you. If you are more of a clan ad hoc person, you're not going to really thrive well in a market hierarchy type of environment. Definitely not a market, right? As far as where you have in the in the internal element of things. So it's just kind of these understanding that how things run. You have two that are focused on very internal focus and integration, and you have two that are very external, but even on the sense of flexibility and discretion and stability and control, all of these things, how they go into play, it can be the extreme. So if you're very clan based, you may not do well in market. If you're ad hoc, you may not do well in hierarchy. It's not a proven science, but it does show that there's a higher likelihood of that being the case. So there's different ways that you can change the culture of an organization through formal statements, whether it's the mission statement, the vision statement, your value statement, that you can now realign and say, this is what we're standing for, this is what we're going for, this is who we are, and this is what we are accepting or not. And you can do it through language, slogans, sayings, acronyms, rituals and rites. Once again, the stories, legends, and myths, how your leader reacts to crises, how your leader reacts to sensitive issues, and then, of course, through role modeling, coaching, and training. And so, with that, this process really helps to instruct the members of your organization about the preferred beliefs and values and expectations and behaviors. And we can use one or more of these mechanisms, which include the physical design. It includes going about rewarding people, and people have titles and promotions and bonuses. Now, I will say that the titles can also warp the culture of your organization as well, because sometimes titles give people the bobblehead syndrome, where their head starts growing out of control and they forget to be humble. So there has to be a healthy balance with that. Something else is our ability to establish various goals and performance criteria, and making sure that we have activities that are both measurable and controllable. And going about changing the organizational structure. You may flatten it where there's less levels to it. You may restructure it in other ways. You may do away with certain positions. Um, and then, of course, you can use organizational systems and procedures. So, all 12 of these ways are great tools to use to change the culture of your organization. Now, the three types of organizations that we have, most of you know about the first two. We discussed this in chapter 1, so we're going to go over it in right now. We have the for-profits. You are formed to be profitable, to make money, to offer products or services. That is the focus. A nonprofit is formed to offer services to some people, and is to a specific type of people. It can be through a hospital, through a college, it could be through some type of charity, but the goal is not to make a profit. And well, let me put it this way: you're not doing it for the profit. Um, every organization has to be profitable to stay afloat, but the difference is the accounting of those profits. So, in a for profit organization, the profits, the excess that you gain, you can use as you want. You can sit them in reserves and just sit on them and let them just accumulate interest. Or you can, reallocate them through bonuses, awards, or, boosting up your senior leaders' salaries. However, in a nonprofit, in the two accounting books that you have the one set of books that are showing how the money is coming into the organization through donations, through gifts, so on and so forth. And then that second set of books needs to show in what areas of your nonprofit that money is being delegated to. It cannot just go into an account to sit and collect interest. That would be a for-profit structure, which means that you just are sitting on cash. You can't have a cash reserve of that magnitude in a nonprofit. It has to be accounted for. So it needs to go to a specific project, a program, a service of sort. It can't just be sitting there and we're like, oh yeah, now we're gonna do, the CEO is gonna give himself a payday. That's not what a nonprofit the setup is for. Now, when we look at a mutual benefit organization, this can be trade associations or unions. This is where you have these collectives that are voluntary, and their purpose is to advance the interest of their members. They are there for as a member-based type of entity to help make sure that those members' needs are met. So those are your three types of organizations. Now, question 2. The United Way is a charitable organization. The United Way of Atlanta, I happen to know the CEO. He's a close friend of mine. Now, when you think of the United Way, and I just said it's a charitable organization, is that a for-profit, nonprofit, mutual benefit, or governmental organization? A, B, C, or D? Click now. All right, moving along. Figure 8.4 is showing you an example of a hospital. This is an org chart for a hospital. As you see, there's the board of directors at the top. Right under them is your CEO, your strategic planning advisor, and your legal counsel. Right below them happens to be the president, and then you see there's a cost containment staff. Below them, you see the executive administrative director and the executive medical director, and both of those directors have directors that report up to them. So there's a bunch of boxes and lines that show the formal lines of authority, and it shows the official positions or any type of work specializations. There are two kinds of information that you can extract from this chart that tells you about their structure. First, you'll see the vertical hierarchy of authority, and that shows you who is reporting to whom, right? So you can see the directors, that report to the executive medical director versus the directors that report to the executive administrative director. Both of those two directors report to the president. The president reports to the CEO, and the CEO reports to the board of directors. But you also will see the horizontal specialization, and it shows who specializes in what work, right? So you can see that on the horizontal line. So vertically, you see who reports to whom, and then you can see who specializes in what particular things. And so that is something that either upon being hired or somehow during the interview process, you should be given the organizational chart for the company so that you understand where you are and who you report to, and who is, who else is, near and around you in the organization. When we look at the common elements of an organization, Edgar Schein proposed 4 elements. And it doesn't matter if it's a for-profit, nonprofit, or a mutual organization. They each have a number of them in common. And Edgar Schein, he was an organizational psychologist. And there are 3 other doctors, professors, authorities, however you want to call it, that agree on his proposal. Now, the first is common purpose, which says that everyone is given an understanding of the reason the company is in existence. The second is coordinated effort, and that's where you're able to coordinate each person's effort into the entire group's effort. And so you're bringing all the puzzle pieces together. The third is division of labor, and that's where you're having different parts of a task that is being completed by different people. And then, we kind of align it together to have a final product or service. We have a hierarchy of authority, and that means we're making sure the right people do the right things at the right time. This is also called unity of command. Now, 3 other authorities agree on the span of control, authority, and centralized elements. Nearly all organizations will show evidence of having each of these 3. Span of control is the number of people that report directly to you as a manager. It could be narrow or it could be wide, right? So you can have a lot or a few. Your authority is the accountability, responsibility, and the delegation that is given to you. And this is a difference between line positions and staff positions. And then the third is centralized versus decentralized authority. And this is all about who makes the decision. Is it upper management? Is it middle management? Is it a combination of where frontline can also make decisions based on certain parameters? So these are the different things when you're looking at it that way. The basic types of our structures. You have a simple structure, which the authority is centralized. One person has few rules, low work specialization. And you see this in a lot of our smaller organizations. You have an owner, an administrative assistant, right? It's a 1-2 combo. And when we say a lot, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of organizations are based on this simple structure. This can be your mom and pop companies, running landscaping, construction, insurance sales, consultants, other similar businesses. Um, both Apple computer, Apple the company, and HP, Hewlett Packard, both started as a two-man garage startup that, of course, grew from there. So they only had two people that they're rolling with initially in the garage, right? That seems to be the Silicon Valley's, the stories, right? That becomes the myths and the legends. So this is the simple structure. Then we can go into the functional structure that you have people with similar specialties that are put together in more formal groups. And the top one is a structure for a business. You have the president, and then those that report to the president happen to be these VPs of marketing, finance, production, and HR. In the second structure, which is a hospital, you have your chief administrator, and then you have a chief of medical services, and then you have directors of admin services, outpatient services, and nutrition and food services that report to the chief administrator. So this is a quite commonplace structure seen in all different types of for-profit and nonprofit organizations. Then we have our divisional structure, and this is where you have people with diverse specialties that are put together in formal groups, and they're put together by categorized by similar products, geographic regions, or customers. So examples would be like Time Warner, the media giant. They have different divisions for magazines, movies, cable TV, recordings, and so on and so forth. The Warner Brothers part of their empire has divisions that span from TV and movies to retail stores. They have broadcast network, amusement parks, music, theaters. So that is a product divisional structure, which is that very first one that you see. The second one is a customer divisional structure, and that tends to group activities around common customers or clients. So, for example, Ford Motor Company has separate divisions for their large trucking customers, their passenger car dealers, and then they have another division for their farm product customers. Did you know that? I think most people think about maybe just the passenger cars, but you don't think about the other two. And another example of this would be like a savings and loan might be structured with divisions where they can make mortgage loans, consumer loans, agricultural loans, and business loans. Now, when we look at the geographic divisions, we are now grouping activities around defined regional locations. And so this is frequently used by our government agencies. For instance, the Federal Reserve Bank has 12 separate districts spread across the U.S. The IRS has several districts. And so you can see that type of divisional structure geographically. When we look at the matrix structure, although you may think about Neo, it is not that the movie Matrix. As you can see in figure 8.8, this is combining your functional and divisional chains into a grid so that there are two command structures, one that's vertical and one that's horizontal. Now, it usually doesn't change. These are the normal departments or divisions of an organization, which could include marketing and finance and production and R&D, which is research and development. The divisional structures may vary. So the functional structures usually don't change. Your divisional structures may vary, and that could be by product or customer or brand or geographic region. So the that can change divisionally, but functionally they usually remain the same. And so you can see that under the VP of marketing, which is to the far right of your screen, you see that's the functional structure. So all 4 VPs report up to the president. But as you see below them, you see the project structure and the 4 projects, which happen to be, and this is based on Ford. You see Taurus, Mustang, Explorer, and the Expedition. Those are the projects. And from those projects, you then see that the purple little squares are the team members that are part of those projects. And they then report to the VP of marketing and to the project manager that they are aligned with. So if I am in project manager Mustang, because I love Mustangs, you see that I am now going to be reporting to that VP of marketing as well as to my project manager. I'm going to be reporting to the VP of production and to my project manager, and going all the way across the board, right? So you can see those grids. Now, there's of course can be some issues with this type of grid combination, especially if there are any issues amongst those VPs. If there's any spatting going on, like some little tiffs, child play, it can impact the project team members greatly, especially when you need something signed off. So, it does definitely require some team collaboration as far as behavioral conduct and alignment. And your corporate culture can have a major play on that to make sure that there aren't any clogs that are in that pipe. I will say that if done the right way, it can be beneficial. If not, it can create, like I said, some headaches. So with that, let me see. We have our horizontal design. And this is where we have various work groups or teams that are going to come together either on a temporary basis or a permanent basis. And the reason why they come together is to help improve collaboration on various work, or to work on various tasks that they have that they're going to share. And what they're going to do is break down the boundaries within. So the first design was the functional design of functional structure, and that included the last 3 structures. So that's the first organizational design, was that. The second organizational design is this one, the horizontal design. Can you see that? And it's called a team-based design, or it's also called teams or work groups. And when I talked about breaking down those internal boundaries, an example of that would be if managers from different functional divisions are brought together in teams. And those are what you call the cross-functional teams. You see how they zigzag? And those managers from those functional divisions are brought together to solve a particular problem. And that's the barriers between the divisions breakdown. Now, the focus on narrow divisional interest will create a common interest in solving the problems that brought them together to begin with. yet the team members still have their full-time functional work responsibilities. So they don't get to table that, then put a post-it note on it, come back to it. They still have to do their regular full-time jobs. And then oftentimes they have to formally report to managers above them as part of that functional division hierarchy. But this is one way they come together to say, okay, how can we fix some stuff that's going on? So as you see, we have our functional structure, as I've shown you earlier, the VPs that report up to the president. And then you see the project teams, right? So you have the light trucks, the sedans, and the sports cars. And of course, you see the zigzagging pattern of them reporting up to that functional structure. Below them are the project team members, right? So you can see how this all comes into play. So the work that the team members do, of course, gets reported upward to their product managers, who then are having to report, cross-functionally to these other vice presidents. Now, when we look at the structures of a hollow or network, you can see that the core of those functions, you see right there on the screen, the little circle, the core of personal computer company in the U.S. They're going to outsource other functions to vendors who can do the work for cheaper or much faster than the core company can. So the personal computer company is going to outsource their accounting and finance to a company in the US, their distribution to a company in Canada, their assembly of components to companies in Mexico and Asia. Their design is going to be handled by a studio in Sweden, and in Japan they're going to have an engineering company handle all of those elements. That way the core company can then focus on what they do best. And so the opposite of a bureaucracy that has numerous barriers and divisions is a boundaryless organization. It has no boundaries. It's fluid, it's highly adaptive, and is usually linked to your IT companies. They come together to collaborate on common tasks. And the collaborators may include coworkers, customers, suppliers, and sometimes even competitors, believe it or not. And this means that the form of the business is always changing and the business relationships are informal. In the hollow structure, it is oftentimes called the network because you have these key functions that are outsourced and other functions that can go to vendors. And this helps you retain some of your core processes. So that could be the marketing. It could be some other things. But as you can see, I did not mention that some other processes could be, HR, warehousing. So it seems to hollow out the organization. So these are the ways in which you can just really get down to the nitty gritty so that you can get your work done. And what happens is that, especially if it's done faster and cheaper, but if it's just done cheaper, however it is, then the case is that what is then brought back, that end product that is brought back, you then are doing a major markup on it to sell to your customer for a great profit. So, so hopefully I explained that well enough. So the next thing is a modular structure, and this is where you assemble product chunks or modules that you provide by outside contractors. So, for instance, you may have a business jet that's built in Ireland and then is shipped to Kansas to be assembled, such as Bombardier's Continental jet. And this is different from the hollow structure in that it's oriented around outsourcing certain pieces of a product rather than outsourcing processes. So you're not outsourcing your HR or your warehousing. You're just outsourcing certain chunks of the product that needs to be created or assembled. In this particular structure, you're going to, well, I've already said what I was going to say. So let me give you an example. If you compare this to a bunch of Lego blocks that you can just snap together. Does that give you a visualization? So you have these Lego blocks that are then out, and then you just be able to then assemble them back together. So there you go. Now, the virtual structure and then we have a virtual organization. The organization, their members are geographically spaced apart, and so the work is usually done through collaborative computing, email, and other type of computer connections. In the virtual structure, you are creating to specifically respond to a market opportunity that you deem as exceptional. It is usually temporary, and your now I will say really quick with the virtual organization, your customers oftentimes think that you are one single unified organization, and they think that you're in a real physical location. They don't know that you're virtual. They think that there's an office space. And a lot of times you can also put on that facade and have that image by having a mailing address that goes to a physical space to a virtual to a company that will host virtual organizations. So an example is a web services company that name Automatic Inc. Um, they have an office in San Francisco, but they only use it occasionally. Its real offices are their homes of their more than 100 plus employees that work in over 26 countries. They're in like over like 100 cities in probably 30 states in the US. And sometimes the employees would hop on a plane and meet face to face, but they mainly just engage through their internal text-based blogs, their and things of that sort. They're doing Skype and Zoom and everything else. Now, when they do have misunderstandings, they will talk on the phone. With a virtual structure, you can tap into a wider talent pool and not be limited by geography. So you can save on money on real estate. And I think that with everything that COVID showed companies is the ability that you can actually have a lot of your workforce work from home. That saves money on real estate, because what people don't realize is that those buildings that they house their workers in, you're paying by the square footage. You're paying for all the utilities that are associated with that building. And if you don't own the building and the land under the building, you're then paying an exorbitant amount of fees and rents. So you can cut those costs down. You can also save on travel budgets, or you can allocate that money for travel budgets if you want to offset it that way. So it's all of these things can come into play when done the right way. And of course, COVID forced companies to streamline faster than they were prepared to, and some still aren't fully functioning the way they should virtually. But I've been saying this for over 15 years. I've tried to have clients create more of a virtual flow of a work from anywhere type of environment. They could come into the office, but creating those types of systems and processes that allows that flexibility, which by doing so does not then restrict your employees of where they can live. Because if by chance I have to move and now the only place I can afford to move is an hour and a half away from my job, that's placing a greater burden on me. If all of a sudden if I have to choose between my job and going to take care of a family member in another state, I'm like, wow, I don't want to lose my job. And you shouldn't have to if the job has that level of flexibility. Now, don't get me wrong. If you happen to work in an environment that requires you to be on site, it's a requirement. It's the only way the job can be done. Then yes, there are restrictions there. But for other types of environments in industries that allow for that flexibility, by all means, it should be embedded in as an option. Now, question. XYZ Hospital has a chief of medical services, a director of administrative services, and a director of outpatient services. XYZ has what type of structure? Is it functional, simple, divisional, or matrix? Which one? Functional, simple, divisional, matrix. They have a chief of medical services, a director of admin services, a director of outpatient services. Which structure is it? Functional, simple, divisional, matrix. All right, moving along. Now let's look at some of the factors in creating the best business structure. We have a contingency design, which is how we go about fitting the organization to this environment. And there's 3 factors to consider. The first is the environment of mechanistic versus organic. The second is differentiation versus integration. The third is a link between strategy, culture, and structure. And so we're going to talk about first is the mechanistic versus the organic. Just to give you a little insight, hotels often have a mechanistic design. So I'm just going to kind of lead with that. So table 8.2 shows you the difference between the two. In a mechanistic organization, authority is centralized. So tasks and rules are very clearly stated. Employees are closely supervised. There is, of course, bureaucracy, so it's very bureaucratic. There's rigid rules and top-down communication. It is effective in certain aspects of hotel work, for example, because the market demands uniform product quality and cleanliness. In general, it works best when an organization is operating in a stable environment. So it does not work well, for instance, in a global pandemic like COVID-19. As we saw that a lot of hotels went out of business, right? We do see that new companies have gone through a rough and tumble startup period, and they may decide to change their structure so that they're more mechanistic with clear lines of authority initially, and then they evolve. In the organic organizations, authority is decentralized, so there's fewer rules and procedures, and there's a network of employees that are encouraged to cooperate and respond quickly to the tasks that are unexpected and maybe coming from different directions, like a fire hydrant. This is what would be called a loose structure, and this was a basically a term that was coined by Robert Waterman and Tom Peters. And with that, you may see that organic organizations can also be termed as ad hoc because they operate on that type of ad hoc basis where they improvise as they go along. And you could see this in IT companies that favor this arrangement because they're constantly having to adjust to the changes in technology. Now, when we look at differentiation versus integration, differentiation is an impulse towards dispersal that arises because of your technical specialization and division of labor. So you will behave in specific delimited ways without coordinating with other parts of your organization. So a company could produce dental floss or deodorants or some other kind of personal care product, and they might have a different product division, each with its own production facility and sales staff, which is a differentiated organization. In an integration, it is a concept of having your specialists work together to achieve a common goal. And so this means that to achieve this, you have to have a formal chain of command and standardization of rules and procedures, and then you use cross-functional teams and computer networks so that there's frequent communication and coordination of those moving parts, right? So you're going to integrate everything in, bringing all those puzzle pieces together. Now, with that, there's a link between strategy, culture, and structure, and how we go about aligning those. All of the cultures and structures that we've described so far are used today because they have advantages that make them appropriate for certain cases. And of course, they have some disadvantages that make them not useful for others. So with that, there are some clear roles and strict hierarchy of extremely mechanistic organizations that are clearly suitable in a system that value careful routines and checks and balances. Like a nuclear power plant definitely needs to have a mechanistic organization. A fast-moving startup that's drawing on sources of expertise throughout the world would most likely benefit more from a flexible culture and an organic structure that has lower boundaries between the functions and the organizations, right? So under your organizational culture and structure, it'd be aligned with the vision and strategies. And if managers change the strategy, they need to then also change the culture and structure to support that strategy. If a company or as a company grows, the culture and structure needs to grow with it, right? There has to be flexibility and not rigidity. So with that, looking at Career Corner, how you go about managing your career readiness, you have to understand the business and assess where and how you fit in, decide how you can effectively adapt, and become more adaptable by being more optimistic and proactive, learning orientation, being more resourceful, taking ownership and accepting responsibility, expanding your perspective by asking different questions. And so there's some questions that I really want you guys to be able to focus on. So the assessment is that you'll see in your textbook is about the mission or purpose of your unit work, and how long you have worked with your coworkers and their background and different things of that nature. So you'll be able to read more about that in your textbook. And then, of course, focusing on those KSAs. So if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure sharing this with each and every one of you. Have a wonderful day.